Good evening, guys. I'm your host, Josh Baskerville, and today we'll be talking about environmental racism. When people hear the word environmental racism, a few things pop into their mind. So I decided to gather some of my friends and ask them about what they feel like environmental racism is and to share their experiences on what they've gone through in their own environment. So today I'm here with one of my good friends.
Tay and class of 2027,
And Tay and can you tell the class where you're from?
Austin, Texas.
Mhm. So do you feel like or when you hear the words environmental racism, what are the first things that pop into your mind?
I feel like environmental racism is basically a group of people not letting another group of people have the same access to resources or things that allow them to succeed as a community.
And in Austin, Texas, have you experienced any of this environmental racism?
So, where I grew up and was first born, um, it was a place called Pflugerville, and it was a like heavily like black community, I guess you could say. And I lived there probably until I was like 11, and then there was a lot of like gentrification, and there was a lot of like rent was going up and stuff like that, and it was kind of like pushing the agenda or narrative, obviously in the background that like they wanted to kind of get rid of, not get rid of necessarily, but kind of change the environment and make like it less, I guess you could say, black. And it shows now if you look at the community as of now from like comparison to like 2010, whenever I lived there to now, it's like more predominantly white.
Do you have any like personal experiences that you went through?
I actually do. So when I was about 16, 17, and I had went back, I was driving and I went back to Pflugerville where I had lived at previously. And it was a really different community by that time. And so I was driving and I had just dropped my friend off. I was driving back home and I wasn't really paying attention. I seen red, and then I turned and I seen red and blue lights behind me, and I didn't necessarily understand why. I was kind of confused because I was driving under the speed limit. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong at all. So there was a Taco Bell to my right, and I pulled up to the Taco Bell, or I pulled over to the Taco Bell, and I stopped my car, put it in park, turned it off, and but the cop walks up to the window, and I rolled my window down, had my hand on my steering wheel, just in case he felt like threatened or anything. And before I even like had a conversation, before he told me what he was pulling me over for or anything like that, he was just like, "Go ahead and step out the car for me." And I didn't know at the time, but that is not like necessarily right. I didn't know until after when I talked to my parents and stuff. They was like, they're supposed to tell you at least like what you're getting pulled over for before they tell you to do anything. So he basically told me get out the car. I got out the car, and he asked me if I had any drugs or anything or any weapons in the car, and I was very confused. And I was like, "No, why? Like, why would I have any of the sort in the car?" And at the time, I had dreads, and I was wearing like very, I guess, urban clothing. So I guess you could kind of see how I fit a description of like a typical criminal, I guess you could say. And I got out of the car because I just complied with what he was saying. I didn't want to argue with him at all. And he told me that he thought I had stolen my car, which is a car I had just gotten. And I mean, still to this day, it might have been a mistake or some sort, but he told me to give him my ID. I gave him my ID, and he said this car doesn't run back to you or something like that. And it was like a big like misconception. But he continually asked me like, do you have any drugs in this car? Do you have any weapons in this car? And I kept telling him no, and he kept asking me. So I felt kind of like, interrogated, I guess you could say. And so as this is happening, I see another police car pull up, and I'm like, well, that's pretty weird. I don't think, that. that was necessary at all. So I kind of like felt scared for my life, and this was around the time whenever there was similar situations such as like George Floyd. So I felt very threatened. And he basically just kept like pressing on me, and he said like, "Is this car stolen?" And I was very confused. He asked me for the deed. I had the deed in the car. I gave it to him, and he still felt as if I had stolen the car. And I guess my mom had seen my location, and she seen I was pulled over, and she actually called the like local police department, and the situation ended immediately. So I don't necessarily know what was going on, but I definitely felt as if I was feeling some type of prejudice or something along the lines, because as soon as I called, and it kind of seemed like it kind of seemed like he was doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing. And as soon as like my mom called and was like talking about what was going on, the second police car pulled off, and he just told me like, "Okay, you're good. Like have a great day." And it was kind of like really weird, because I felt like that wouldn't have happened in the community 10 years prior whenever I lived there. And it just really shows like kind of the way that environmental racism can kind of create a stigma in a community and change the scope or like the narrative of it.
Crazy experience, man. Thank you for sharing that story. All right, where are you from? Detroit, Michigan. When you hear the words environmental racism, what are the first things that pop into your mind?
First, really like being where I'm from is the amount of resources black people have compared to other races. And because black people make up most of the hood, you go like generalize into what the hood have compared to what the suburbs have. So in Detroit, there's not like Walmarts or like the big fast food, big commercial grocery chains, or like good health care, affordable health care, affordable car insurance. It's just not the same amount of resources that I have. I was somewhere outside of Detroit, somewhere in the suburbs, compared to what you have in Detroit.
And what type of environmental racism do you think you personally experienced?
Personal experience, I've definitely personal experience not having the same amount of like educational resources. Because I went to a school in the suburbs, but that was because I had to drive to the suburbs to go to that school. If I went to a school inside my city, saying that Detroit doesn't have good schools, just for my situation, my life, and the sports I want to play, I have to go to a decent school just so I can get good enough grades to just come to West Point. And football's what got me here, so I definitely say education resources has put a setback in my life leading up to this point.
You would say like availability in certain areas.
Definitely like availability, just like overall, what's funny, like my education, whatever that may be. It's like food, PE, whatever. Like that's a lack than what I would see like was benefit or something.
Thank you for sharing your experience.